Hello, guys. Welcome. We're talking about the news and how it impacts the way that we feel. I'm coming off the past 3 days having watched more news media, broadcast media, particularly TV news, watching more TV news in the past 3 days than I've watched in the past 3 months, nay, the past year. And I feel very, very tired today, very drained. And the only thing I can attribute it to is the thing I've been doing differently, which is watching more news because I'm a person that doesn't watch very much news anymore. So thought it might be helpful to come on here and talk about that. Talk about why it is that the news impacts how you feel, what it does to your emotions, and what it does to your nervous system, and also some skills and some tools to help regulate your emotions. I'll be giving you tools of how to help yourself feel better, which can be applied to either having watched too much news or applied to any area of your life where you're feeling really intense feelings. And I'll give you that technique right at the start of the video. But first, I have a couple of announcements, which I'm going to give you after our little introduction. So if you haven't been here before, welcome. This is Love and Fandom, where we believe the relationships we see on the screen help us to understand ourselves at a deeper level and have a better relationship with ourselves and each other. I'm Cheryl Muir. I'm a coach, counselor, relationship person, and I've been coaching women and men for 8 years on how to fall in love and stay in love and how to have happier, healthier relationships and lives. You may or may not know, some of you may have been following me for a very long time and know this, I used to work in public relations for 5 whole years when I was in Canada, which is where the picture on the thumbnail was taken. That was taken when I was in Canada, when I just left PR, actually. In the street I'm walking down, I'm walking towards an office I used to work in, and if I reversed back from where the picture was taken and turned left, that would be where I used to work, which was in one of the Bentall Towers in Vancouver, which is where 50 Shades of Grey was filmed. It was filmed outside of there. Somewhat strangely, I was there when they were filming it. Anyway, the point is, I've worked in public relations and with the media, so I understand how it works. I'm not just some random person on the internet gobbing off. I've worked with the media. I understand what this is, and how it operates behind the scenes. The news is one of those things that everyone has an opinion on, like the housing market, like the economy. Everyone's got an opinion, but opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. As one of my good Australian friends used to say. Everyone's got one. Everyone's got an opinion. It's true, right? Everyone's got an opinion, but I did used to work in the business. And I left PR in 2015, 2016, 2014. So it's a good few years since I've worked in the business. It has been a while. It's been 8 years, but it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot, and this is why it's impacting our emotions more, because of the nature of breaking news. When I left PR, influencer marketing was just becoming a thing. We called it blogger outreach. We'd contact local bloggers in Vancouver to help with promotions on some of the consumer-based stuff. A lot of my clients were consumer companies. I was on some of the consumer files, so I can't mention any names, but it was coffee companies, it was fast food restaurants, things like that. Things that would be obviously against my integrity to work on now. And then the rest of the clients were natural resource companies. So yeah, that's who I used to work for and help them have a good reputation, which was pretty hard some of the time, let me tell you. But it's changed. It's changed. Blogger outreach was new and upcoming in 2014, and now, of course, influencers are all over the internet. It's a whole industry. So things have changed a lot. One thing that's changed is the news cycle. News is 24/7 because of social media, and this is why it's impacting our emotions. So let's get straight into it and give you some techniques that are going to help you feel better. Before we get into it, a quick announcement. This video is sponsored by the Vault Classic relationship courses that you can access anytime, that are super affordable, that are going to help you know how to master your emotions and boundaries, how to communicate, how to understand why you're dating the same person over and over again, and ultimately develop all the skills, belief systems, energy, practical things to help you get into a long-term partnership. So if that's interesting to you, the details on the Vault are down below. And the course that matches what we're talking about today is a course called How to Regulate Your Emotions. How do you regulate your emotions? There's two things you can do, and I'd like you to close your eyes with me if you would. You can keep your eyes open, but then you're just looking at me with my eyes closed, and that's weird for both of us. Just close your eyes and ask yourself, how do I feel? How do I feel? What emotion is most present for me? When did I start feeling this? Did something specific happen? Was it something that a person said? Was it a memory I had? Was it the headline I saw? Can I pinpoint a time when I started feeling this emotion? Where did it start? What's it linked to? Does it remind me of anything? Does it remind me of anything from my past? Can you give that emotion a name? What I'd like you to do is to say to yourself, I am feeling, and insert the emotion name. So it could sound like this. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling tired. And are you aware of any physical sensations in your body? Is something hurting? Does something ache? Does something feel sore? How does your body feel? And what do you need? What do you need to give to yourself? And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Some of you will have been through that process with me before. We've done it a couple of times here on the channel. What that process helps you to do is understand what it is that you're feeling, if it has a trigger and a root cause. When we can differentiate between the trigger and the root cause, that's really important, right? Because we can understand, this person said this thing, and that made me feel, it brought up these emotions within me of anger, sadness, overwhelm, fear, frustration, the feeling of being unseen, whatever it might be. They brought that up within me, triggered that within me. So that's the trigger, that's the thing that happened immediately in the present. And the root cause is something in the past. What did it remind you of? Well, actually, it reminded me of that time that, I was really embarrassed at school, right? The teacher humiliated me in front of the class. Or it reminds me of being raised by a very critical parent, very critical mother, who didn't allow me to have my own voice. And what that does is it really furthers your healing, because you understand now what your trigger points are. And when we can walk through the world without being emotionally activated by people all the time, we have a lot more power and mastery over ourselves. And why is this connected to our romantic relationships? Because our emotions and our lack of emotional regulation is the number one reason most relationships fail. It's the number one leading cause of arguments, of conflict. That comes from the data of me. I don't know what the data is on that, but from what I see, from 8 years working with clients, that is the number one cause. When we can understand how we feel and what triggered us, we can explain that to a partner calmly, instead of flying off the handle and slamming doors like our parents used to, because they didn't have the skills and they didn't teach us the skills. So we need to have those skills now. We need to teach them to ourselves. So those two questions again: how do you feel and what do you need? Nurture versus numbing. We are going to get onto the news, but I feel like this teaching component is really important at the start. I completely lost my train of thought. I'll just continue on. It's important that we know how we feel. It's important that we teach ourselves these skills. I cannot remember what my train of thought was, but we're just gonna get into the news segment now. So one thing that the news does is it hijacks our nervous system and makes us believe everything is an emergency. The immediacy of the news makes us feel everything's happening now, everything is an emergency. I was talking to a friend the other day. It was on the day of the Queen's passing, and we were both watching the news together. She was in a different location, and we were texting each other. And she said, God, they can talk for ages about anything. It really is a skill. Nothing's happening and they're still talking. And they were giving lots of B-roll footage. Maybe it was helicopter footage of someone in a car going along the road, that classic thing that makes your brain believe something's happening, but it really isn't. But they talk and talk and talk, and they make it feel like, this is happening now, and therefore this is an emergency. And what that does to our nervous system is it puts our nervous system on high alert. It releases adrenaline and cortisol, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that our system does that. That's what we need in an emergency, to be able to outrun the threat, the saber-toothed tiger of yesteryear, or the threat that we might have physically to our safety now. We need to outrun that threat. But this isn't a real threat. What's happening on the news can't actually reach you. But our nervous system is reacting as if it is, as if it's a real emergency. When you have prolonged exposure to adrenaline and cortisol, it breaks you down, it wears you down. And that's when people get things like burnout, right? So when stress becomes too much to manage. The second thing it does is it gives you a negative worldview. So one thing I know from having worked in PR is that 70% of the news is created by public relations people. Who are the public relations people? They're the people who are getting companies in the media. So who is paying the PR people? It's corporations usually. It's often natural resource companies, all kinds of different organizations. I worked with oil and gas companies, LNG, pharmaceuticals, some very well-known pharmaceutical companies who've been in the news a lot recently over the past couple of years. I wonder who is doing their PR now. I have no idea. But those kinds of companies are the ones that hire the PR people. So a lot of the news is generated by different companies, right? But when it comes to that remaining 30%, the breaking news, it is often covering something that is extremely negative. So there's this phrase in the media, I don't know if they still say it now, but they did when I was in it. If it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. What does that mean? It means that if there's been some kind of loss of life, that will be a news story. It becomes newsworthy because life has been affected. And while that makes sense, what it does is it gives us this view of doom and gloom, right? What if what's shown on the news is only 10% of what's happening? And that 10% might be extremely bad. There's a remaining 90% that's not on the news because it's not newsworthy, right? It might not be newsworthy that someone had a beautiful meal with their family, or someone helped an old lady cross the road, or someone's having a really incredible day, or someone, broke the cycle of generational trauma in their family. That might not be newsworthy, but it's worth knowing. It's worth knowing that. What I found from not watching the news for about, when did I start it? I think it was during lockdown at some point, because it got really extreme, didn't it? It got really, really extreme and really stressful. So I turned off the news from about summer 2020 through to now. So I've had about 2 years news free. I do see the headlines that come up. I use mainly Twitter for that to see what's trending. And I'm very aware of what the headlines are. I'm aware of what's going on, but I don't watch broadcast news anymore. And I'm very, very selective about how many articles I click on, because I know how it makes me feel. I know how it affects me. So I don't want to be ignorant of what's going on, but I don't want to dive into things that are going to impact my well-being. And I don't want you to either. And by the end, I'm going to give you some journaling prompts and questions to ask yourself to really set appropriate limits with the amount of media you consume, the amount of news that you consume, to help you stay well and help your emotions stay really regulated and really calm, and help your nervous system too. So we've been through a lot over the past 2.5, 3 years. And the predominant story at the moment, in addition to the Queen, is of course the cost of living situation, the increases. Did you notice there's a word I didn't say there? And that word is crisis. I'd like to do a quick exercise. So close your eyes again if you can. I'm going to say 2 different sets of words, and I'd just like you to tune in on how you feel when I say both sets of words. So we're going to start with set number 1 first. War, crisis, poverty, disaster, death. Set number 1. How do you feel? Let's move on to set number 2. Love, generosity, compassion, healing, growth, expression, understanding, devotion. How did that second set of words feel? I gave you a few extra ones, the second one to counteract the first. These words have power. Our brains are really strong. And when we hear words like that, our brain reacts. And our brain doesn't know the difference between something that's real and something that's imagined. And so when we hear something on the news, we feel as if it's happening to us and it's happening right now. The thing is about that is that we're not effective. We can't help when we feel overwhelmed and drained. Which leads me to the third point I want to make about doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is being on the Twitter machine, scrolling for hours, or binging on the news, as frankly I have over the past 3 days, and has made me feel like crap. It brings up anxiety, fear, and powerlessness. We think that it helps us to create change, but we can't create change. We're not positioned to create change when we feel overwhelmed. Notice too the emotions that come up when you're fighting with someone on the internet about a current event. Right? Because of the emotions that are generated within us, we feel like we're making progress. We feel that somehow we're contributing because we feel all hopped up on, adrenaline and cortisol and all this other stuff. And we're telling them, no, you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong, and let me cite all these reasons why you're wrong. There's no progress in that. There's no mileage with fighting people on the internet. It doesn't create any change whatsoever. If we put all that passion into a cause, into a movement, that's productive. Point number 4 is exactly what I just said. So it brings up anger with topical issues that rub against our own values. And this causes us to divide from other people who have an opposing view. So anytime there's a topical issue, of which there are many, I'm not going to mention them. Anytime something's political or there's a topical viewpoint, talking point, the issue du jour, we have a value connected to that, whether it's our values of, freedom and fairness and decency, or, the rights of certain groups that have been treated really badly. When we hear about that, it overlaps onto our views. And so when someone has it overlaps onto our values. And so when someone has a different point of view, we feel personally aggrieved because it's about our values. But again, fighting with people on the internet, while it might seem productive, it really isn't. It really doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't create change. It's just two people fighting with each other and not wanting to hear each other. And that is obviously not great for our relationships. When we can turn off the news for a little bit and not be so polarized with a lot of these topics, we have a better chance of listening to the other perspective. Just getting curious about why they think what they think and not trying to make it wrong. When there's two opposing viewpoints, there's often an overlap in between. And sometimes there's enough of an overlap for us to find a common ground with someone. And other times there's no overlap whatsoever, and that's when people fight with each other. And it is not something that's going to move you forward. Fighting with a stranger on the internet does not, no one wins there. And when we can also have that awareness of, just stepping back for a minute and say, no, I feel I'm actually feeling really unheard by this person. And maybe you were unheard when you were little, and that feels overwhelming. So I'm going to step away from this situation because I'm not going to continue to speak to someone who's determined to not hear me. I'm not going to do that. It's not good for me. Now, there are instances when someone is just flat out unkind, mean, cruel, and there's a mean-spirited tone, hostile edge to their comment. They slide into your content and put something in your comments which is not justified, or there's no real need for them to have done that. We don't have to analyze ourselves. We don't have to psychoanalyze the shit out of ourselves in those moments. Sometimes someone's being really unkind and it hurts because what they did was hurtful, and it's not much deeper than that. But there are other times when, a political figure is the personification of what we value. And a political figure on the opposite side, left and right, a political figure on the opposite side represents and is the personification of someone else's values. And those two people meet and they're fighting each other. And it leaves two people feeling very unheard and very angry. And again, with the nervous system, right, when we're feeling that anger and we're feeling, anxious and all of those things, that adrenaline, that cortisol is really going to wear us down. There are real things happening in the world. There are people that are suffering. There's real change that needs to happen on so many different topics. But if we really want to help, we need to be very careful about how much time we spend taking in all of this information. So let's look at some questions. Let's cover some questions that we can ask ourselves in terms of what's going on in the news. And I didn't write these down, so I'll think of them off the top of my head. Give me a second. I'll think of some questions for us. Okay. When I watch the news, at what point do I start feeling worse? How much time has passed before that emotion hits me? Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 5 minutes? Second point, second question, second task. Next time you're watching the news, ask yourself this question: how do I feel right now? How do I feel? If we feel absolutely incensed with rage, that might be justified because there might be something happening that we feel really, really justifiably upset about. So the question then becomes, what do I want to do for this cause? What action am I moved to take by compassion and by giving? What action do I want to take? You might want to do some research, right? What organization needs your help? Can you volunteer? Can you donate? What is it you need to do? Is there a petition you want to, create and start? That rage might be justified, but it's misplaced when it's just spent feeling angry while watching the news. So what action do you want to take? Which topics do you want to stay informed about? And how will you do that? Knowing all of this, what's your time limit with the news? What's your daily time limit? Do you want to spread that across online-based news, like Twitter feeds and so on, and broadcast media, or will it be one or the other? I think that's the end of the questions I wanted to give to you. Basically, what I want you to do is to look at your relationship to the media, to the news, how much time you're spending on it, and be really aware of how you feel. What I've noticed being news free for 2 years more or less, is anytime the news is on, I am very aware of how I feel straight away. What I noticed over the past 3 days is I started to become really, really numb to what I was feeling as I was watching it. I was so drawn in, I was almost like hypnotized by it, just watching it. And there were emotions, I was very, very tearful on Friday when I was watching the news about the Queen. Really, really sad. But then as I was watching more and more of it, I became numbed out to what I was feeling. That numbing is not good. It's not good for us. So I hope that gave you something to take away, something to think about, and something to apply. I'll be back tomorrow with another live around the same time. The topic is going to be somewhat different. So it felt important to talk about the news today because that is a form of screen time. It's entirely possible I'll talk about social media in another live. I might talk about virtual reality. Oh God, I have some thoughts on virtual reality. There's a video up above if you're curious about what my thoughts are on that. I'm very, very concerned about virtual reality, VR, augmented reality, the metaverse, all of that. I'm really concerned with how it overlaps with fandom as well. Many of us love these characters we see on film and television. And I surveyed my audience on TikTok, and there were not an enormous amount of responses, but of the people that replied to the question, if you could meet your favorite character in VR, would you? Everyone said yes. I find that really deeply concerning and disturbing. I really believe that being able to press the exit button on reality through technology is going to be really, really detrimental to many people's well-being. And it's going to be potentially very addictive to people who already want to escape because life feels hard. And the reason that the way to stay where we are and not escape is to feel what we feel. Feelings are feedback. Feelings give us feedback on what's good for us, what's not good for us. And what we feel when we're in a relationship is information as well. When we spend time with someone, do we feel better? Do we feel optimistic, energized, happy, glowing, radiant? Are we smiling? Or do we walk away from spending time with a person feeling drained, kind of tired for no reason, feeling misunderstood, feeling like unheard? That's feedback and information on whether or not that person's good for you. And the same applies to news. We're obviously about relationships on the channel. That is about the relationships we have with each other and the relationship we have with ourselves, and how we can use, film and television to look at the relationship we see on, a Netflix series, and we can analyze them and get some information to look at, what are the red flags in this relationship and what can we learn about our relationships through looking at theirs. So it's not about psychoanalyzing characters for the sake of it. It's really about using them as an example, really, and then having tools to apply to our life so that we can be better, healthier, and happier. And I haven't covered the news before on this channel, but it felt important given what's happened, and frankly was something that was really on my mind given how I'm feeling today. I'm feeling very, very tired and very, very drained because of this excessive consumption of news over the past 3 days. So there's definitely some takeaways for me here. I hope it was helpful for you too. Thank you for being here. I've been Cheryl Muir. This has been Love and Fandom. You can find me on TikTok at I am Cheryl Muir. Please do subscribe to the channel, like the video. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was in the comments below. If you want more from me, if you want to know how to work with me, the details are down in the description. And my website is cherylmuir.com. We do have a sale on courses at the moment. 2 of my courses are 10% off in September. And the course that's most connected to what we talked about today is how to regulate your emotions. It's a super affordable course. It's going to help you to understand what you're feeling and how to help yourself feel better, and actually create a plan to soothe yourself, self-soothe when you're feeling really overwhelmed, tired, and so on. So I'm going to go take care of myself now. I'm going to have my cup of tea, sit in the garden, get some fresh air, possibly read a book, and just really, really nurture myself. Oh, before I go, nurture versus numbing. This is a real bonus for those of you that stay to the end. What's the difference between nurture versus numbing? Nurture helps you feel better. Numbing makes you feel worse. The thing that nurtures you is the thing that feels hard to do in the moment. It's getting on your, your trainers and going for a walk or a run. It's sitting down and doing a meditation or doing some breath work. So you think, God, I can't be asked to do that. But afterwards you'll feel better. Numbing. Numbing feels really easy at the time. Pick up my phone, open an app, scroll, 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 numb, numb, numb. It's really easy to do it, but I'm going to feel like crap after it, right? Nurture versus numbing. Numbing makes you feel worse. Nurture helps you feel better. I'm very tired. I'm stumbling over my words. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time and have a beautiful day. Bye for now.